Okay, everybody, we're live on the air. I'm Jason Onspach. With me is Nick Cole himself. He's
And
waving
Jason
for those of
Ansbach
you.
himself.
Yeah, that's
Jason,
true.
the
We're both
real Jason Ansbach.
right. Yeah, there's a couple of other ones, but I'm the real deal. And Nick, you're waving for the camera, but
I'm waving for the camera.
I don't know anyone can see that necessarily.
That's okay. I don't care.
No, that's all right. Yeah, you've always kind of done things your own way. So,
Exactly.
Galaxy's Edge. I don't know where to begin with this project.
Right.
Let's start off just talking a little bit about it. You made a really good comment earlier about Galaxy's Edge when you were saying that we're basically just playing with action figures here.
Yeah. That's it. And it's just, it's the easiest way to tell people what it is. And I think how we've gotten all our subscribers so far and the people that are really excited about this project is it's just Star Wars, not Star Wars. And I think everybody who loves the Star Wars universe, boys and girls, I think it's fun to live inside that universe because the universe is so well developed and so big that you could have interest and favorite parts that have nothing to do with this sort of really grand story arc that at times, really truly to be fair, has been mishandled, and at
Mm-hmm.
times it's been absolutely poignant and brilliant. But if you were a kid and you had action figures, you didn't recreate, the Death Star blowing up, or, maybe you recreated Han Solo getting frozen in ice, and you're, with some water, and you put it in the freezer and everything like that, and then you melted it with warm water, sort of an early science experiment. But probably told a lot of your own stories with your action figures, and so when we decided to do this project, that was how I wanted to approach it. Is I wanted to now write down those stories that I played with as action figures in the dirt, and just um, not Star Wars, but it's definitely a Star Wars world, and that maybe the science isn't as deep, so that we can have more fun. Maybe there are single biome planets. There is light speed. There are robots that we call bots. There are blasters, and we don't have to get all technical about lasers and the sound of starships in space, but we can just play and have fun. And that this is my reaction that I've been ranting about a lot since I listening to me, in that I really love hard science fiction. I really love it, but it is an absolute killjoy for I mean, like, if you ever talk to really hardcore science fiction fans, and I mean hard SF guys who are like really like people who read like Alistair Reynolds or Baxter or stuff like that. These are people who really write interesting stuff, but it's very killjoy science fiction in that, no, there's going to be no warp speed. There's going to be no blasters. Aliens aren't probably going to be humanoid, and there's not going to be some sort of, in fact, you're probably here's a big hard SF thing. You're not actually ever going to find aliens because the universe is too big and too old for any one civilization to exist at the same time. The odds are against your civilization existing with another alien civilization that could have any relative meaningful interaction, whereas Star Wars just is, there's there's maybe 10 different alien civilizations per planet sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And so the fun of Star Wars is just, it's just fun. So I think that's what's been missing a lot from science fiction, is everybody's trying to nail down this world that they want to create. But if you do look at a lot of the science that's out there, no, there's certain things you can and can't do, or but I think actually you can make justifications, and you can do simple turns in your mind saying, well, there's a relative space orientation, and every ship has gravimetric plates that simulate real gravity, so that people can run around inside a ship while it's pulling. If you look at the G forces the Millennium Falcon would be pulling, everybody inside of it would be ripped, mashed to pulp.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but you can say, well, no, science is, how many people drive a car and have no idea how a combustion engine works? I would say nowadays, 90% of the people. How many people are using a cell phone or a computer right now and have no idea how the technology works? A lot. And so, we can have these people playing in this universe, and you can have a little girl flying a starship, though she may not understand the mechanics of hyperdrive travel or astrogation or stuff like that. But, she knows push this, go this, do this, and you can do these things. And so I think where Star Wars still have where Star Wars is still really relative to the discussion of entertainment these days is that you can have fun and not take yourself seriously. My one argument would be that this last movie, what was that called, The Force Awakens?
Yeah.
Um, it 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 verged on not taking itself so seriously. The weapon that stole energy from the sun. So here I am saying, don't criticize us if we play, and I'm criticizing them for playing. So there's a fine line there. I'd probably like to keep it a little more real than they did, but at the same time, I want to applaud them and play just like they played, and I think that's what you want to do. How did you, Jason, view this, and what did you want out of it? What did you want to extract from it?
No, that's the exact same idea. I think that we've both read enough science fiction to know that there is some writing out there that can be kind of a killjoy. And for every just delightful piece of science fiction like The Martian, which just really fun to read, there's about 10 more that you kind of feel like you're reading a term paper, and you end up reading it for street cred as opposed to for enjoyment.
Yeah.
And like you said, no kid wants to play with a spaceship and just keep his or her mouth closed because it's not making noise in space. You want to be able to kind of like, and just have it dive bombing. I think what science fiction allows us to do is look at the fun aspects of life in our age, and maybe in the past 50 years. Mm-hmm. You look at World War II and how much that inspired Star Wars, but be able to look at that and say, but wouldn't it be neat if there were still undiscovered frontiers? And wouldn't it be neat if you could just go and do anything? Instead of saying, hey, I'm going to up my things and I'm going to move to New York, you could say, I'm going to leave this planet and I'm going to go to this planet where everybody, looks like this, walks like this, and lives on platforms that sit on the ocean. It's something that you don't get to do in most types of fiction.
No. And, the problem with most science fiction writers is they're complete nerdstroms. And, they're like, now I'm going to explain to you why the fish people have a platform. And you're like, no one cares. I mean, like, it's fun sometimes, but I think what I've discovered about writing fiction is don't explain everything. Let there be a little mystery. Let there be the edge of the map. When you go back and you look at Tolkien, and I just was doing a map thing this week for another project, and I see a lot of modern maps like Game of Thrones or World of Warcraft, and they're very interested in giving you an entire picture of the world, like, this is the map of everything. But like that actually in those settings wasn't always the case. You only had a limit. And that's why I always love going back and looking at Tolkien's maps, because they're not complete. You're like, well, I wonder what's to the east, and there might be this one road that says the Lone Road, and you're like, and your mind could tell these stories. And so I think this kind of project in Star Wars is, if you keep that sort of compass in mind, like, I don't have to explain everything. There are fish people. They walk around on land, but they're fish. And they have hands, and they use blasters. If you really wanted to, and you're an actor, and I'm an actor, and we both studied improv, you can justify anything. You can make up the fiction. You can do whatever it takes. But, is that interesting to the reader for you to get a biology class and, a physics class and all this stuff, or is it easier for me to make it realistic and no, there wouldn't be fish people on the planet and blah, blah, blah. Or could we just have fish people and play, and that's, I think the population now is maybe willing to accept that. They're just willing to have some fun. I think interest and spectacle and drama are far more important nowadays than getting it absolutely science right, because the truth of it is the universe is a big old place, and there could be fish people that walk around on planets.
Yeah, well, and there will be in our world if we decide it, and that's the nice thing about it.
Sure. Yeah.
Are you going to include that in the next chapter?
The next chapter. Yeah, I think so. I think we've done the initial introduction of the heroine in my arc of it, and we've done the introduction of your how should we term him? I don't want to be disrespectful. The handsome smuggler, dark stranger,
Yeah.
rogue.
Well, it's interesting. I didn't describe him as handsome, kind of because, like you said,
I just thought he was.
exactly.
I thought he was Jason Momoa.
Yeah. That's like all my characters, like in our D&D podcast. It's everything.
Yes.
Just go back to him. No, but that goes to what you're talking about. I felt one of the lessons I learned is that I don't need to look at a picture of Grace Kelly, say for one of my noir books, and say, okay, I'm going to describe Grace Kelly so that people can know exactly what's in my mind. If it's relevant to the story, fine, but people will put an image in their head without you telling them what the person looks like, and they'll probably like the character more because they're able to endear it to themselves.
Yeah, I actually rarely describe skin color in my books, and someone because of my certain beliefs or whatever, someone tried to make a racial accusation stick against me one time, and I said, well, how don't you know the main character is black? And they didn't, because I never described the skin color or anything like that. It's just, I think people see what they want to see. And a lot of the times I don't want to ruin it for them. In The Old Man in the Wasteland, I was fully convinced that you could either have Mike from Breaking Bad play him or Morgan Freeman. And I even thought at one time it would really be cool to get an older Chow Yun-Fat. So, you could have any of these things. And so I think sometimes over description ruins it for them. But at the same time, the trick that I've noticed with this Star Wars universe is that it's super visual in a certain way. So, because that's what, when we watch Star Wars, we really like to look at the ships, and we really like to look at the spaceports, and we like all that sort of ordinary spectacle is what I call it, because those people, they don't walk around and go, wow, the Death Star. It's very, commonplace for them, or wow, there's an assault, destroyer in orbit and everything like that right above us, or they don't get blown away by it, but it's still pretty cool. Like whenever a new ship comes into a Star Wars movie, like your eyes, or at least mine do, just sort of feast on it and devour it. And so that's where I'm really working on, and what I'm working on in this novel is taking the time to paint what a starship looks like. So, and I wanted to say the cupola is like, the cupola of a B-29. And so it's got that riveted feel, and there's blisters along the side, and the engines are back here, and it's got two decks, and the ramp lowers out of here. But at the same time, you want to make those descriptions tight and concise and powerful, so that it's the look of that ship. Like the iconic ship I'll be using in this in my section is called the Obsidian Crow, and I want that every time that ship is in a scene, I want the image stamped into the reader's mind. So I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, that should be fun. And so we've got
in the podcast. People see this. I'm doing a monkey face. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, he is actually. If you can see that. So yeah, I think it's off to a good start, and the feedback I've gotten has been that this is a very Star Wars feel, and they're hooked in, which is what we were hoping for.
Right.
What I think is interesting is there are some thematic elements, like you mentioned. The character I introduced, Captain Keel, has that kind of smuggler who's in it for himself. And so I think your mind kind of instantly gets drawn to some other famous smugglers, but I think people will be surprised if they're waiting for us to just kind of play Star Wars with different names.
No, and see that what I actually wanted to do, and you're absolutely right there. I wanted to play with tropes and reverse roles. What if the like in my arc, what if the Obi-Wan character were actually Boba Fett?
Mhm.
That's what I wanted to play with, instead of just now the typical wizard, which is all Obi-Wan actually is. He's a wizard.
Mhm.
And now he's going to give you the quest and you're going to be young and blah, blah, blah. But in my story arc, what I wanted to start off with was, what if Obi-Wan's sort of this kind of wonky bounty hunter who has memory loss, and there might be a lot more to him than people guess. And then what if the Luke Skywalker character is a little girl with a big kick butt droid who's basically a murder droid, and she's intent on revenge. She's not
Mhm.
looking for adventure or finding herself or submitting her application to the what is Luke submitting his application to? Not the Rebels.
The Academy.
In Star Wars 1, in the Academy. What Academy? Do they
It
ever
was
explain what that
it was
Academy
the
is?
Imperial Academy. So you go and you get a
So
free military education.
Let's explore Luke Skywalker. You mean that cat was just a hair's breadth away from being an Imperial scum, and then just
Well,
because he meets this wizard and gets some friends, he just joins? See, I've always had the contention Luke Skywalker is the worst Jedi in the world. So,
worse than Anakin?
he
Worse
is.
than
He's
his
a terrible
dad?
Jedi. Yeah, no, Anakin's awesome. No, I mean like in power and restraint and all those things, like he is just a terrible Jedi.
Uh-huh.
He has his force powers suck when you really think about it.
Well, yeah. I mean, he had some trouble. I mean, Yoda seemed more intent on messing with him than training him, and Obi-Wan just got him off
but
on the
even
wrong
in the
foot.
end, but he gets beaten in a bunch of fights. He's
Yeah.
not very good. He only ends up winning because his dad helps him.
Yeah.
Like if you really go through and dissect Luke Skywalker as a Jedi, he's not very good. You know what I mean? Like as in not very capable. But now that we add this whole thing of like, well, he could have just ended up in the Empire. Anyways, so instead of having that kind of character, the young optimist and blah, 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 actually, I wanted a little girl who's pissed off and wants revenge for her family being murdered. Like, and that's a whole thing. Like, Luke Skywalker barely ever acknowledges Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru ever again, or his dad. He's just like, what? Mark Hamill is terrible.
Except for his Joker. He's got a good Joker.
No, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I really like Mark Hamill in a lot of ways.
Corvette Summer.
As a voice actor, he's one of the best. And in Star Wars, he was a lot of fun. It's not his fault, but I think here's what when I think about this project, it's really the first movie, Episode 4, Star Wars, and and then the toys that come along in the other episodes, great, but like. The reality is Star Wars was really a one-off movie. They came to Lucas afterward and said, could you do more? At the same time, they were coming to him and say, could you do a TV show? Could you do a Christmas special? Like all this that he had some grand plan or master plan wasn't, this was a movie with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you didn't need any more. But it was so phenomenal that, of course you'd be stupid not to make more. So, what we're trying to do here, I hope, is in that same vein. And they're like, let's tell complete tales. And I made this comment in Control Alt Revolt in the future, there's so many Star Wars movies, but they're all repetitive. And I wrote it before the new Star Wars movie came out. And I said, the main character's doing this mini game where they have to answer questions about, Star Wars 16 and all that kind of stuff. And the character confesses it's all becoming a blur because every movie is someone's, mysterious relative. And then we've got to blow up a big thing. And then I went in and watched the latest movie and I'm like, someone's mysterious relative and we got to blow up a big thing. And like,
Right.
Are we doing that every movie? Is it just a soap opera and then a fireworks show? That's the danger of Star Wars. And I don't want to do that with this because you and I know the arc of this what do we call it? Multi-arc, that we're telling a tale that can be wrapped up in one book. And yes, it has ramifications. And, if readers say, I really want to know more about Prisma Mydoon or Captain Keel, yeah, we can definitely provide that, but you're going to get a satisfied closure. But you and I both know it's a fairly dark ending.
Yeah, it is. And that was actually one of the things we said we wanted to avoid,
Yeah.
that it's a
Right.
big galaxy and we're not going to do that thing where, yeah, everybody's related. Like, guess what? Brothers,
Yeah. Yeah.
cousins,
Yeah, exactly.
like,
You can, and that's the whole thing. You can still have people hate each other's guts and, be passionate about something. But boy, the easiest answer in the world, and it was such a stunning thing. That's the thing you have to go back to, is that I was in the 5th grade and I was playing basketball, and this little punk in the 6th grade, and I can see his face right now. He's like, I went and saw Empire Strikes Back. And I remember I was younger, and I was like trying to play basketball, do my skyhook shot. That was my big move at that time. And the kids
that's a good
all,
one.
Darth Vader is Luke's dad. 8-year-old me was pissed.
Did you throw the basketball at him?
Son of a, yeah. I think he was bigger than me and he would have wailed on me. But
Oh yeah.
That was a stunning moment, because and you're younger than me, so you don't know. But like when Star Wars came out, you were convinced that Luke and Leia were boyfriend and girlfriend, and Darth Vader was bad. And then Empire Strikes Back just comes out and says all that stuff, blah, it's all different. And what most people don't understand is, like, honestly, no movie had ever done that before, because there weren't 1, 2, and 3s of most movies.
Right.
It was just, that was the story. Wallace, Jaws, everybody got eaten. Like, the comparable movies at that time, there weren't 1, 2s, and 3s. And so Star Wars comes along, and to Lucas's credit, he didn't do the typical, and he did something interesting and different. I say all that to say, when we talk about our universe, is that is done to death now. It's like the tired old uncle joke at every party. You just, and everybody, but like every show I'm watching on TV now, every hero show, every, The Walking Dead's the only one that actually doesn't do it. But like every superhero show, it turns out bad. The villain is, everybody's related, and it's this hat trick that's just being beaten to death. And so I think what you and I committed to do is, yeah, you can still have vicious reveals and conflict and, epic struggles between good and evil, and it doesn't have to involve relatives. And it's just, you're a big fan of old school film and old school noir, and the thing that most people don't understand that made old school noir great was they couldn't talk about sex.
Yeah. Right.
The thing is about sex, but they couldn't talk about it. So they got really creative, and that's how you get the noir look. And that's how you get the femme fatale. Oh, what? A woman's actually a bad villain? Yeah. They were just ditzy straight men. So noir should be credited for feminism, actually. And then at the same time, the look and the feel and the grittier stories. So when you get constrained by things, they actually make you stronger. We learned that as actors in this game called New Choice, where you're just sitting there holding, you're doing your improv in a yogurt shop, and you're working on your cup of yogurt, and the teacher screams out, "New choice!" And now you're skinning a deer. New choice! Now you're throwing a football. New choice. You do this. Like, I've had a teacher do this to me like 50 times, and you're like, I got nothing. But you know what you find? You get more. Like, you get rid of all your tricks, and you actually start learning and doing it. And that's where you get to Will Ferrell levels of crazy improv samurai. And so that's what we want to do here. We don't want to do any of the tricks, but at the same time, we want to take what you guys did, and we want to surf close to the line and play with it.
Yeah, totally. No, and I think I hope that people enjoy it, because this is one of the most fun things I've ever written.
Yeah, it really is. It's pure fun for me, actually.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, one thing
like a break.
Which is also good. You need a few of those. Keep it busy.
Cocaine.
Hello, Doug. One thing people might want to know, and they might not want to know, is how we met up. Because people know you pretty well. I don't think they know me nearly as well. But I think it's kind of an interesting story. Do they know me? They talking about me?
They always kind of, what's he like?
Oh
What's he
yeah.
really like? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how did we meet?
So yeah.
So
So
I feel like I've known you my whole life.
well, we bonded. Yeah, that was kind of good. So what happened was there was a little project called
That's right. I remember
Apocalypse Weird.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So here's how I met
What?
you. I was watching a I don't know, Michael Bunker was doing something for a while where he was doing like video podcasts, like video blogs,
Right.
and
Yeah.
he had you on one time, and you made the comment that before you write, you always pray. And I was writing Till Death at that
Yeah.
time, and I was like,
I do.
oh, and I was just so impressed that one, you made a point to say that instead of giving kind of the easy artistic answer to say, oh, well, I wait for the
Yeah.
muse to hit me and, have a glass of scotch. And I was like, hey, already, here's a guy who's approaching writing the same way I am. And so I kind of
Right.
reached out on Twitter and we, chatted back and forth.
I like that.
So then when Apocalypse Weird kind of said, we're looking for authors, man, I lobbied hard. Like I hadn't even released my
You
book
did.
and I was pushing
Yeah,
hard to say,
but what I read initially, like we got a lot of people who wanted to play, and there were some people. Well, okay, I'm going to edit that comment because I would hurt people's feelings, not yours. But you initially jumped out because your writing was solid, and you're kind of a Western Stephen King kind of guy, so we bonded on that level.
mm-hmm,
But jumped out because you were capable. Um,
mm-hmm,
more than capable. And then you just had a good attitude. There were people that we gave jobs to on that project that ended up like stabbing us in the back and getting all petty and bitter. And like, it was the weirdest thing. And people that, so like we have a saying in acting, how do you make an actor complain? Give them a job. And I always thought that was like a joke because I was always grateful to be wherever. I'm sure I complained and stuff like that, but like suddenly we gave somebody who wasn't selling any books and had no chance, an opportunity to write with us, and they're forming secret cabals and groups and, stabbing us in the back. And I was like, oh my gosh, you let this go straight to your head in record time. I know people that are ginormous successes that it hasn't gone to their head, and like it's Andy Weir's one of them. Totally hasn't
mm-hmm.
gone to his head. And he's one of the nicest people I know. And it's so if anyone has a reason for it to go straight to their head, it's Andy Weir, and he has it. And here you are, barely able to get two sentences together, and we're giving you a chance, and your staff. I think I'm venting here.
Yeah, a little bit cathartic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So we met
So
on that project, so I will rein myself in.
Right. Yeah. So I started working a little bit more and helping with some marketing before the project ultimately failed. And I think anyway, that's another podcast if people want to hear it. But
Sure.
but in that time frame, we started playing.
I'm actually trying to bury that.
Yeah, let's just keep it dead. That's fine.
spend money having Apocalypse Weird scrubbed from the internet.
Let's keep it scrubbed. But the other nice thing that came out about that was you and I realized we both like playing D&D, and so we started playing D&D together. And that's, I think, where we really bonded.
And we were both kids that, because of our background and upbringing, D&D came with a certain stigma.
Right.
And so I think, yeah, and that was the fun part to do that. And that's really a cool thing now, because I feel like that has legs now. Like that podcast has legs. I was actually just in a meeting with like a legend in the game industry, like actual verbatim legend, World of Warcraft guy, original lead designer. And he said, hey, I saw your podcast. That's great. I was like, wow, then, like we just added a new player who happens to be a publisher who does some really great stuff. She does some great book, Kat Rocha, and she's really big into the comic book, San Diego comic book scene. So I think she's a really good ally, and that's one of the hardest things to do in this whole indie Wild West. And what you see many people doing badly is they're just jumping on social media and saying, buy my book. I just, I have people like just literally like tag me and then put their book description. And it's like, you're doing it wrong. And I know, because I think I did some of those things, to be fair. When I was first starting out, you did some obnoxious things. But what you learn later is what you want to do is be interesting, and then and then people will be like, wow, I really like this cat, I'll read some of his books. So, you know, some people buy a big old boat and take pictures of themselves eating Tostitos, and some people are, you know, like Kevin Summers are really into, you know, like I know people who love literary people, you know, like in the literary establishment, who love Kevin Summers' farm pictures. They really relate to it, and that gives him entree to sell books. You know, like the most. I mean, I think I know some writers actually who do nothing but write, and they're actually very successful. So they have to create, and you really know what I'm talking about. They have to create an alter ego,
right,
just to seem interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and that's not who they are. I actually know in real life they're actually 8 to 10 hours a day in their seat, and then sleeping, and then getting up and doing it again, because they're in a window. But they'll create this sort of, you know, boozy persona. So, you know, with this project, Edge of the Galaxy, what I like about it is the project itself is just fun. So many books have to be sold on the promise of, I guarantee if you will drop a little bit of money, you will have a good time with this book. Well, that's not always the case, but like, I just like writing this just because it's fun, you know, and I'm successful enough now that, you know, I can just do things that are fun and enjoyable and enjoy myself and do the thing. Yeah, I could spend my time doing some other stuff, or even ghostwriting for bigger authors, or, you know, cranking out my own series and everything like that. But always at the back of my head was, I want to play in Star Wars. And I know that because it's now owned by Disney, that there is probably a red spinning siren light on someone's computer. And if it says like, we should get Nicole to write a Star Wars thing, that red light would spin and sirens would go off, and it would say, never,
right,
never let you, do you know what this person has said and done on the internet? He's a horrible person. And that's cool. I'm perfectly willing to accept that. So I just said, well, I'm going to play in Star Wars and have fun. And, you know, that's it. And you can't stop me, and they can't stop you. You can't write Star Wars. I'm not writing Star Wars. I'm writing Star Wars, not Star Wars. You're writing Star Wars, not Star Wars. And we're just playing, you know, it's probably classified as fan fiction, you know. Fan fiction would be, you know, people who've written their Luke and Leia or Luke and Han fantasies. You know, we're not doing that, but we're just talking about hyperdrive, you know, and the crazy thing is all this stuff was in the science fiction zeitgeist before the killjoys of hard science came along and ruined everything, you know. And like, they sort of came out, like, it was really weird. They were a reactionary movement that happened because of Star Wars. And, you know, like, that literary cloud wanted to poo-poo, oh, Star Wars is for stupid people. You know, you've really got to understand that we could never even get close to light speed. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways they made science fiction a weaker medium. Though I love, like, this is the weird schizophrenic part of me. I love that science fiction. It is really fun to read, and it blows your mind, but it's absolutely boring. But it made science fiction a weak medium, and it's why 5 years ago science fiction became monster porn. As in, like, science fiction turned into vampire hunters and sparkly vampires and wraiths and, you know, rogue wraith girls who hunt vampires in the city at night because they're half demon. That's not science fiction.
No.
That's sort of like romance porn, supernatural romance porn. But literally 5 years ago, that was science fiction. And it became that because it was so weak, and it got hijacked by a really super leftist mentality. And they wanted to tell these sort of all-inclusive diversity stories. And that's why we have this crap now. So I really want to, like, when you go back to Asimov loved hyperspace. And when you go back to the Masters, they were perfectly willing to play with this stuff. And everybody was like, no, you can't have hyperspace or warp speed. And then they invent this drive, and they're like, yeah, you can. It's theoretically possible now. But, you know, for so long, you know, and I remember hanging out at this game store, and like older nerd kids would just cap down on me, you know, whenever I would talk about this stuff. They're like, no, it's impossible. So this is our rebellion against the killjoys.
Right. No, totally. And the point is not to talk about whether it's possible or not. The point is to have a mock battle between the Starship Enterprise and an
Right,
Imperial Star Destroyer. Like that's the point. To
right.
really say,
We're
okay,
not
what
we're
would
not
happen?
doing that.
Right.
We're not doing that, but we're having like, we're we're just telling stories in that universe of really. Did you die?
Yeah, I died. No, my little baby boy came into the room and kind of laughed at your voice.
I laugh at his face.
Yeah,
Just
he thinks you're a funny guy. He thought it was a good point though.
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah, no, we just have, we're telling stories of these epic space battles and not getting bogged down by the fact that, you know, a nerdstrom would tell you, well, there's no such things as lasers in space, or you don't have laser blasts, you have connective lasers, whatever. We're having fun. Go read some Baxter.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. No, and that's just
Yeah.
it. The whole point is to have fun. And the reality is that the G.I. Joe style laser, which, is a colorful blast across, when every bolt is a tracer, it looks cooler.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the way that you can do it. And all these things can be justified and had fun with. But the problem always with science fiction is that there's sort of just a really super left-brained, Aspergery group that loves it, but they're the first ones to rip it to shreds. And
Mhm.
that's gaming has the same thing. You can make something wonderful for gamers and they'll immediately jump on the forums and tell you why it's the worst piece of poo they've ever made.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you're like, and I come from Pong. I come from Super Cobra and Scramble and Asteroids, and like that stuff was devastatingly amazing to me, to the point that like I would risk suspension or detention. I got detention playing video games. I like lied to my parents and stuck out one time to play video games. All these things, I risked physical beatings because video games were so stunning and wonderful to me. And like I never could have imagined, like I'm playing Battlefield 1 and Skyrim right now. I
Mhm.
never could have imagined that we would get to this like living, breathing world or battling with 64 of your friends online at one time. But you'll go on the forums and people are like, this is terrible, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. And
Right.
that's how science fiction is sometimes. Like sometimes the fans can be their own worst enemy. And so I think the appeal that we made to everybody in this one is we went in very lowbrow and very non-pretentious, but we sought readers who just wanted to have fun. And what I was sort of blown away by is the response of people that just wanted to have fun. And no expectation, like we're just doing Star Wars, not Star Wars. Someone had just asked me that question a few hours ago, like, are you going to have single biome planets and blasters? And I'm like, show am.
Yeah.
And
Right.
they're like, good, I'm in.
Right.
And that's, people are just hungry for a little fun. You can enjoy The Walking Dead on a certain level, but if you want to get into logistics and bullet making and gas, which I had to learn for The Old Man in the Wasteland, gas only has a shelf life of about 6 months.
Mhm.
So no one's driving cars, or Daryl doesn't have a motorcycle 5 years in. That
It's
ain't
kind of
happening.
it's kind of sad for Mad Max.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I did in Old Man in the Wasteland is I invented a military fuel, because right now the highest they have is called JP8, and it has a shelf life of about 2 years. But I invented JP9, which had, the military knew that there was going to be a nuclear war, so they invented 100-year life shelf stable gasoline.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And
It's a good way
so
around.
that's how we do it. You can also do jet fuel too. Jet fuel doesn't has a longer shelf life, so that you can do that. So there are ways around this, but if you want to be all nerdy and rip stuff to shreds and that's your joy, don't read this, because we're just having fun. We're having wonky freighters and guys in super combat armor with
Mhm.
blasters chasing around robots and little girls.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I plan to change with the Legionnaires, who are kind of our shock troops of that world, is I'm going to make sure
Right.
that their armor actually can or common blaster fire.
Yeah.
I think that
And
that's a
like, did you
must.
like, yeah, and did you like, I made one of the first statements I made in that opening chapter introducing them, because I said, they're excellent shots. Like they don't miss. And
Yeah.
then I wrote this scene where they don't miss. They disable a freighter in about 1 second. And
Yeah.
like you know, and that was always like a wonky Lucas thing. And they even held on to it in this last movie. Stormtroopers are still horrible.
Right.
And
No, they are.
yeah, and that's like, they're not supposed to be horrible.
Right.
There's,
Yeah.
but again, you can justify it, and you can say the clone thing is degrading. But then, how did we get to this kid who's playing the new Stormtrooper? I don't know. They got some explaining to do, or maybe
Yeah.
they
No.
don't.
Oh, it's just an excuse to have your hero in a hail of gunfire or blaster fire and come out
Right.
unscathed every single time. But yeah, in reality, if these guys are the operators of the science fiction world,
Right.
they're putting you down before you have a chance to even respond.
Well, like you just said, and you said something perfect, and you're absolutely right there, that they are the operators, but you said it's an excuse. And like, maybe sometimes that's the thing that makes people pull back on Star Wars, is there's too many easy excuses. And going to that film noir and discussion that we had, maybe sometimes stop making excuses and find an actual way around it. You know, like maybe take that as an obstacle and work with it. So that's why I wanted to throw down the gauntlet on those Legionnaires and say, actually, they're great shots.
Yeah.
And now Prisma Maydoun and this bounty hunter and Captain Keel are going to have to up their game just a little bit to dodge through that hail of gunfire. Not just, sometimes the characters in Star Wars act like, and I was in the military, and your dad was in the military, so you know, no one in the military runs through a hail of gunfire. The first thing you learn to do is crawl on your belly with your nose in the dirt. That's called the low crawl. And then you learn to do the high crawl, which is a different kind of crawl. But if anybody's shooting at you, you're on the ground. You're never just running forward. And so, like, it's really weird that no one in Star Wars ever hits the dirt. Like, everybody's constantly like, you know, like in the first scene in Star Wars, I was just watching the outtakes the other day, where the rebel guys, like, they literally hug the wall, you know, before the stormtroopers come in. And it's like, who thought up that plan? You know, so you don't want to, like, put some stuff between you guys.
Right. Well, even in The Empire Strikes Back, you know, when they're kind of doing their trench warfare and they take down one Imperial walker and then they
jump up.
Yeah, some commanders like, well, let's charge.
You know, let's
one
go
of them.
Forward.
Yeah.
What?
I might not follow that order. Sorry.
Let's charge.
Like, I know.
I've got bold plan here, guys. Let's charge the big mechanical walker.
Fix bayonets.
I know. And so, you know, like, there are things that are cinematic, but there are things that are, and that's where I think we wanted to, one of the words that we used when we talked about this is we wanted to make it gritty. And I think doing things like that, like making, you know, like having someone point a blaster at a trooper and it doesn't outright kill them. It just, and I termed it, they have reflective armor. And I even had them, you know, described it as sort of a mirror polish armor so that they can reflect shots, you know, and if anyone's wading into battle, it's these Legionnaires, because they are slightly invulnerable, and that's going to make the heroes, you know, run a little bit more or have to get a little bit more clever, or maybe like the mercenary carry. And that's the other thing that I wanted to explore in this. I don't even know if I talked about that with you, but we talked about the precursor to all of this was a war called the Savage War, where they actually used ancient weapons. And so what I wanted to riff on that about was slugs. And so the mercenary that I'm developing, he actually doesn't use a blaster. He uses a slug thrower. And that sort of negates armor. And he's just kind of old and crafty that way. Yeah, it's not as slick or cool, or, you know, maybe there's some supply things that go with it or reloading, but at the same time, his shots are kill shots. Yeah. So that kind of makes him deadly.
No, totally. And I think that's the fun stuff. And one of the things that, like we mentioned, kind of writing, every character has a backstory in this story, whether it ever comes out or not. Even some of the troopers that show up for a second have a backstory. But with the Republic being bloated in our world and kind of a bureaucratic mess, the way that I'll be introducing later, as far as my Legionnaires go, is going to be political appointments. So, if you're going to serve in the Republic Senate, you want to have a stint in the military to sort of polish up your career, and of course, you want to be a Legionnaire, and of course, you can't be enlisted, and so you have a partial officer corps of people who don't belong there with these operators, and they're the guys that screw things up.
Yeah, actually, and that would have gone a long way with, you know, Star Wars, for them explaining a lot of their incompetency. You know, that you have this officer class that just isn't hardened, or, you know. So yeah, I like that. I think that's cool. I think that's going to add a really nice texture, and you know, playing with the tropes, and then painting close to the line, and then, you know, maybe explaining why things are the way that they are, it will make this story really cool. Now, probably some people are like, well, what are you going to do about the Force?
Mm-hmm.
And I think initially what we decided is we weren't going to have the Force. This is just really a super Star Wars equipment. I mean, when we say style, what we really mean is equipment. You know, like, it's just the technology of the universe. But then as we kind of came along and began to think about things, we thought, well, it would serve this one character to have it, and it's a big reveal. But what we wanted to do, or what I'm thinking of doing with the arc that we're working on, is, and, you know, of course you have to agree, but
I don't agree.
So it's out.
Yeah.
It's not the force so much as the dark side, which I think it's because, you know, invented the Force, and it just seems to get nothing but corrupted. It just seems to be nothing but misused.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who doesn't misuse it is sort of weak and gets taken advantage of, and blah, blah, blah. So that's, you know, like, the Force in real life would be this very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And if you or I had the Force, you'd be using it to get the remote. You know, you'd be using it for everyday life.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's how normal people are. And so what I wanted to do with this is there's no good side to this initially. This is a power that absolutely corrupts people, and one guy finds it. No midichlorians. Nobody's born with the Force. You got to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you find it, you can become a master of it. We'll have to come up with another name besides the Force.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely corruptive.
Right.
You know, because it's super dark. You know, it'll mess you up.
Yeah, well, and even in a Star Wars universe, I think that the way we're doing it makes sense, because, you know, after the Jedi fall, and you've got the Emperor who's hiding his Force abilities, and you've got Darth Vader who's obviously using them, but the vast majority of the galaxy, it's just blasters, speeders, and technology.
Right.
There's not magic users everywhere, you know.
No, and Star Wars has become way too heavy focused on the Force, to the point that it's really taken over the entire universe. If I were to tell all of these stories that we have in our heads and what we want to do, so far I would say we have a good 10-book arc if we wanted to. Sure. But that's only if people ask us to do it. Like, we really could just write this and walk away.
Yeah.
But if I were to honestly say go out to that 10-book arc, I would tell you that there's only 2 Force users in this entire universe.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
Keeping it special. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And it jacks them both up. Like, literally, they become not good people because of it.
Right.
You know, no matter, and I think the 2 characters that I'm thinking of, they start off with fairly noble intentions.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I really say that, you know, it's like wealth. You can meet people that have, like, what I call the spiritual gift of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Like people like John Grisham. Like, there's a documentary I just heard about today about John Grisham, and he just went to this town and helped these kids and shared his wealth with them and tried to show them about what happens to towns and things like that. There are very few people that would do that stuff with their wealth. I've met other people, like people very open, you know, share, hey, everybody have a party at my house. Not like a, you know, drunken party, but like people who just know that they have this wealth. It's a blessing.
Right.
That it probably exceeded their ability to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're interested in helping other people, in easing burdens and paying for, you know, orphans to have orthodonture, or or glasses. Not everybody would be like that. Most people would be like, I think, the average NFL Super Bowl player. They would be picking out a Lamborghini right after the win. They'd be rolling up to their high school trying to show people that, you were wrong, I'm right, I'm an awesome person. What I say that in short is most people would misuse wealth.
Right.
And the Bible says this. It says, and everybody gets this quote wrong, and I'll probably get it wrong quoting it to you, but you'll know because you got mad Bible knowledge. But it says the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money is the root of all evil. It says the love of it. So I think the Force is like one of those, would be like, quote unquote, the money. And for most people, it would be very corruptive to have the Force.
Right.
Star Wars does try to show that struggle, and it definitely showed it in the Anakin way, though it felt a little like the changes were too dramatic. But I would say, the most awesome use of the Force ever, really, like the movie that nailed what the Force really is The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, sure.
And especially
the power.
Show you this thing will mess you up, and everybody covets it. And then they get to Gandalf, and Frodo says, "You take it," and Gandalf says, "No." But the way that Ian McKellen nailed that moment, of like that he was almost about to. Subtle, it was so masterful, which is why he's such an awesome actor.
Oh yeah.
But it just shows like people who, everybody thinks that they're the Christopher Columbus of like figuring something out, like going to Vegas and making $1 million. But what they don't realize, is like there have been all these Indians before you ever showed up here, and many of them have tried and failed and all these things. So I think the Force is this really super corruptive thing. And so when we do finally, and it's a finally thing, it's not an initial thing.
Right.
I think actually it's really a story button. This is the end of it. When we finally do introduce that Force user, it's not a good thing. It's pretty bad.
No, and I think that's going to be a really memorable time. I'm looking forward to.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I'm looking forward to. Right now, we're both kind of working in the same universe, and we're building a path where everything's going to collide. And I'm looking forward to that time when now we've got to intersect our stories and make the characters come together, and assuming they live long enough.
Yeah, and we'll just do improv and the yes and exercise and hand it off. But I have no fear with you in doing that. Like I was talking about, worked with before, they were so fear-based and they were so protective, and I want to do that. And there were some that were really awesome. Everybody that I pretty much hang out with now in the things that I do was really awesome. Like, John Frater was awesome. Christopher Bohr was awesome. Chris Porteau was awesome. And a lot of people that I'm not even mentioning were really, really awesome people. Forbes was awesome. They wanted to play. They were totally in. And I like people who want to play. But there were other people that were so fear-based and so, like afraid to do anything, because I think they had that. I wanted to say to them, that feeling that you have as a writer, that you're about to be exposed and someone's going to say, aha, you shouldn't be here. That we all have that. Every writer has that.
Right.
And like, I just had it yesterday at a meeting, like, and I've done okay. I'm a good, as Larry Correia called me, he said, you're a solid mid-list writer. I've done some infamous things. I've done some, I've done okay. But I went into this meeting, I'm like, they're going to say, the jig's up, buddy. We're on to you.
Yeah, who are you? Right.
We don't need you around here. And I was like, I was perfectly willing for that to happen. And I think that's just a common thing that every writer has. And there are writers. I just read a really big time writer, and I only got halfway through the book. And I said, life's too short for me to give this guy another 400 pages.
Sure.
Because he's New York Times bestselling author and big science fiction author, well loved in the community, multiple big series. But I could just sense in every page that I read that he was afraid to do anything new because he doesn't want to knock over his bowl of rice.
Right.
And I don't want that. I want people who, are having fun. And sometimes, like, you screw up, but you still have fun doing it. But if you're interested in protecting yourself or defining territory or whatever, you know, or you're interested in showing everybody what a big genius you are, go somewhere else and do something else. So the cool thing about you and I is neither of us confess to being geniuses. I think
Not
I think we're
publicly.
both like fair. No, no, I think we're both just like, well, your D&D character and mine both sort of affect a certain kind of stupidity. Like, yeah, you know, like we don't like I play a laconic Spaniard and you play a frat house barbarian brohammer guy.
Yeah, right.
And we're not making fun of it, but we just act those choices. And I have a lot of fun doing that. But you know, sometimes I don't know if you ever had it in your kid D&D game, but you know, you'd always have that one kid that wanted to show you, you know, what a mastermind they are, and that's no fun. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, the kid that wanted to be Vizini in the party. That's why I never play wizards. I don't want to have the pressure of trying to be the brilliant wizard. I can play the bumbling, but I can play the bumbling wizard. Fine.
Right. But most wizards, actually, everybody plays the bumbling wizard because no one ever plays the 18 intelligence that they have written down on their stats. Because I think like when you go through the old first edition DM's guide and look it up, like it's like fairly super genius, you know, like it's so rare. So like if you're going to play that, that would really, and you'd have to like, the other part is like as a wizard, you really have to have like this Gandalf sense of knowing the big picture. But the DM never sits you down and says, this is the big picture. You know the layers of the universe. These are the major forces at battle. And you can't really tell these chumps about it because you're actually just a chess piece being moved by a chess piece, moving chess pieces. That's how a wizard, in my opinion, is generally should be played.
Right.
But, you know, and not, you know, I'm just saying like, but no one ever plays that. They're like, oh, I'm sorry, I can only do fireball, you know, magic missile or whatever, you know, like,
right. Yeah.
You're like, you're the most pathetic person ever, you know, so it's, you know, it's everybody wants to play the master wizard, but like, I don't think I've ever played in a game with somebody who played the master wizard like you would write that character in a fantasy epic.
Right. No, that's a challenge. You almost have to be in collusion with the DM.
You really should. And like, if I were ever going to do a campaign, I would like seriously consider like, you know, that the wizard should have a lot more time and a lot more information, because information is basically the only way that you can play information is intelligent. The only way that you can play intelligence is information. So in reality, that wizard would have to have a lot, but then the DM's got to do all this stuff and give you all this stuff. But you're absolutely right. The DM should actually be in collusion with the wizard to give the wizard more, but then that's a whole different thing. So I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Well, man, I think we've reached the end of our debut episode of the Galaxy's Edge podcast.
Did anybody show up for this?
Yeah, there's some people that came and went.
Who? They came and went?
Well, I don't see who they are. I just see the viewer count tick up and tick down. And so thank you for listening.
We can't tell who.
I can't tell who it is.
All right.
But I know they're there. We know you're out there. We know you're out there.
I would like to know who it is. Tell me, DM me and tell me that you were here. And it would be fun to do this one time. And the one thing I would say to everybody who's going to listen to this or who did listen to this and became one of the premium partner subscribers, thank you very, very much.
Oh, yeah. From
the bottom of my heart. We know that's a lot to ask, but like, it's so cool that you guys are like, yes, I am totally in. I like I was saying, like, I want to work with those kind of writers. These are the kind of people that I really dig, who are just willing, because sometimes people don't know, but writers get ripped to shreds a lot. There are a lot of really ugly people out on the internet and in the Facebook world or on Amazon. And there are even people who make a game of like trying to torment writers, trying to say really cruddy stuff to them. And then there are other writers, you know, who really are insecure, petty, you know, or whatever. And sometimes they're bigger writers. I've actually been zinged by bigger writers, and that hurts too. So all of it, you know, like all of it really hurts. The worst thing in the world, and the thing I'm always waiting for, is the day that Stephen King, who's really like one of my favorite writers, and like I so look up to him and everything like that. but I know it's just like a matter of time before he zings me one day. And that's probably arrogant, even thinking about that. But I figure it'll be like over politics because he's super left and I'm super right.
Right.
But I think, you know, one day he'll call me a hack. And I bounce back from everything because I was an actor. You have to bounce back from everything. But I feel like that one's going to sting. So I'm ready for it. But I say all day, thank you guys very much. You actually really don't know how much your faith means to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you extremely very much.
The end.